On today's episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with Big Flip Livingstone and Steele Roden, it is an on-the-road playoff extravaganza. We are breaking down the Western Conference Series one by one, giving you winners, X factors, and players to highlight. It is serious hockey time, people. Let's get this money.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on out there, hockey heads, and welcome back inside the lab. A bit of a different lab today. Both Steele and I are on the road, but we are still doing what we do best, baby. We are highlighting some of the best spots in the NHL to make some money. And on today's episode, we will be breaking down every single Western Conference playoff series, giving you our winners in how many games and the players you need to have your eyes on so you are still making some loot in through each round of this series. It is going to be an exciting time. Steele and I are fired up. We're on vacation and we're still tapped in, giving you what you need to stack that money. Speaking of which, today's episode is sponsored by BetOnline. BetOnline.net has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Steele, my friend, this is a big-time episode. We're here. You're down in Mexico. I'm in the U.S. We are still doing what we do, baby. This is the Hotel Bomb Voice special. But in all seriousness, this is the most exciting time of the season. These next 2 weeks are going to be great. We're starting with the Western Conference breakdown today. I'm always intrigued and excited to hear where you're going with your predictions. And let's get right into it, my friend. Western Conference, I don't know where you want to start, but how about the top team, Colorado Avalanche? They draw in against my underdog, Nashville Predators. Injury concerns to UC Saros. Injury concerns up front for Colorado. Where do you think this one goes and in how many games, my friend?
This couldn't have played out worse for the Nashville Predators. The Dallas Stars getting that extra point on the last day, finishing in that top wildcard spot. Nashville, obviously, whatever team goes up against Calgary would have had a better shot instead of the Colorado Avalanche.
Yeah.
I created my NHL bracket. I've got my championship team in there. But yeah, let's stay focused on the Western Conference, then the top team in their division, Colorado Avalanche. I've got them winning this series in 5 games. I could see a sweep, but I'm giving a little bit. I'm going to give at least one game to the Nashville Predators in this first round matchup because they are a good team. They've got some really top tier dogs on the first and second line. You know, we've talked about them all season long. Matt Duchene, especially Philip Forsberg, Ryan Johansson, Mikael Granlund, those type of guys. They've got great physicality in their bottom 6 forwards. Defense are awesome too. Roman Josi leading the way. Like you said, though, it all depends on if UC Saros is able to go. If he's not able to go in game 1, I think they get swept. If he's able to go from the get-go, I give this a 5-game series, but Colorado's taking it all the way. There's no chance they lose.
Yeah, I think this is a really, really tough spot for Nashville. And, I'm going to still stand by what I said. This is a pesky little team that I think really has already almost overachieved for this season. I don't think many people expected much from the Nashville Predators this year. I don't think anyone expected Roman Josi to be that good this year either. I know he's still a great blue liner, but man, they have really kind of overachieved coming up against the Colorado Avalanche in the first round. The only way I see this, if they try and scratch out even a win or two, in my opinion, it has to be in Nashville. It has to be in Smashville. That building rocks come playoff time. We've seen them kind of use that energy to their advantage, which might be one of the only advantages they really have, right? Blue line, you got to go Colorado. Top 6, got to go Colorado. Bottom 6 for sure. Maybe there's an edge in goal if Saros is healthy, but he's not. So I think it got to go to Kemper, who is so hot down the stretch. I don't know, man. This is a bit deflating for me, who had some little Nashville upset talk. But that point at the end of the year for the Dallas Stars, man, what a little thorn in the side of the Nashville Predators. But at the end of the day, I'm not getting crazy with this prediction, Steele. I'm going to say Avs in 6. I think Nashville might scrap out 1 or 2 wins. After that, though, I think this is Colorado's series to lose. What did Daryl Sutter say a couple of weeks ago, right? This is going to be a waste of 8 to 9 days for whatever team gets them in the first round. And I think he's spot on with that prediction as well.
Yeah, and that's a big thing too. Like, because I've said multiple times, I don't have a lot of faith in Darcy Kemper, and the fact that if UC Saros is, if that injury nags him for the first couple of games, there's no chance they win this series, because he has to be that X factor guy. And I've said this plenty of times before. I've never really been a fan of UC Saros up until this season, when he's actually, to me, where he actually proved that he's the number one guy and can be that X factor guy.
Agree.
This is a tough situation for the Nashville Predators. I think, just 5 games for me. They squeak out maybe 1 win, but this series is over in 5.
Yeah, and if you're doing any kind of fantasy playoff pools, you got to be targeting the guys on the Colorado Avalanche, regardless of the second round. We don't know what's happening. They're getting out of the first. You got to try and load up on Colorado Avalanche, Cale Makar, any way you can get any Nathan McKinnon. Hopefully Mikko Rantanen's 100%. It looks like he is. They're going to need him to really go. But yeah, unfortunately for Nashville, I think, again, this is almost like they've hit their peak for this year, if you know what I'm saying. And now it's let's move on to golf season. But let's move on to a second series, Steele, another series that I know you're looking at the most in the Western Conference. I think there's a side bet coming between you and I. Actually, I know there is. Minnesota Wild against the St. Louis Blues, my friend. Game 1 goes tonight, 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. Let's hear it.
Look, this is definitely a tough situation for the Minnesota Wild, because the St. Louis Blues have bested them all season long. Comeback wins, overtime wins, just absolutely getting the best of them. So there's no question that they've had the Minnesota Wild's number all season long. This is probably going to be the best first round series in the playoffs. And there's a lot of good matchups out there, but for me, this is going to be the most physical, the most skillful as well. They've got a ton of skill on both teams, and the goalies are incredible on both sides. For me, Cam Talbot and Marc-Andre Fleury, and for you, Ville Husso, who you just got in that big trade a couple of weeks or last week. Look, this is going all the way to 7 games. This is a full series matchup between these two teams. I've got the Minnesota Wild in 7. I know it's a little biased, but at the same time, it's not biased, because these teams are I've said this before, they're very evenly matched. They've got great goaltending, and I think the goaltending favors Minnesota just a little bit more because of that Marc-Andre Fleury trade. On the defensive side, I think it's a little bit more to the Blues. Torrey Krug, Colton Parayko, they've really stepped up. Even Justin Falk on the back end. I really like the Minnesota Wild's blue line as well. But if I had to give a favorite to anybody, the St. Louis Blues take it for their defensive pairings on the blue line. And then it's very, very, very evenly matched up front. Top 2 lines evenly matched. I do like the bottom 6 forwards on the Minnesota Wild a little bit better. But it's hard because the St. Louis Blues have gotten the best of them this entire season. But I've got Minnesota in 7.
This has 7-game series written all over it. That's I think where the conversation can really start. This is going to be a battle, and I'm really excited to see is it those deadlines additions of the Minnesota Wild that can really take this team over the top. Even the smaller moves that they made. Nick Delorier, this is why they got these kinds of sandpaper, tough, bigger guys. So I believe they also added Tyson Jost before the trade deadline. So these are those guys. Are they going to be able to now mix it up? Make those, make St. Louis's day a living hell in front of that net? Can they also rattle Ville Husso's cage? Because he has been a very, very consistent goalie over the last 2 months. And I do think this series begins and ends in the net. Which goalie is going to step up and steal this series for their team? Because look, my former colleague at the Score, John Madish, has a feature piece up today about the St. Louis Blues. Don't sleep on the depth on the St. Louis Blues, because they're running out 3 top lines still that feature some really, really balanced attack. And I know you've talked a lot about Tarasenko, but Bushnevich, Thomas, Tarasenko, Saad, O'Reilly, Perron, Barbashev, Shen, Kyrou. That's a solid top 9, and I really do think if that top 9 can kind of get theirs, to me, Ville Husso, and same with John Madish, is that X factor in this series for me. It really comes down to, can he steal a game or two? Because if not, we know
Yeah.
how hard it is to play in Minnesota. Those are going to be some really hard games for St. Louis to win there. That building is going to be rocking. So I'm excited. I'm going Blues in 7. I love that you're going Mini in 7. That's a side bet. You can lock that one in. But in my opinion, when it comes to first round juicy matchups, this is the one that I have double circled, because I can see this series still honestly going to overtime multiple times. That's the kind of matchup that I see, because at the end of the day, these teams match up pretty well against each other, pretty evenly overall. So we will see what happens. Lots of bets coming, lots of predictions coming. Make sure you stay tuned for tomorrow's episode, where we will break down all the Eastern Conference predictions, and stay tuned around the break. We will be breaking down the final 2 Western Conference series. Lots more bets and picks coming up, and where you need to make those bets, it's betonline.net, your number one source for all your sports stats and betting info. Find all the latest developments, league reviews, news, including the continuation of the basketball playoffs and Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your wagering information, from live betting to playoffs to esports and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device and learn more about the trends and all the action. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Thank you for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every day. For your next listen, you have to check out the Locked On Now podcast. Nightly recaps of every NHL game with analysis from our local experts. You don't want to miss out on all the highlights. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast, just like this podcast right here. So if you haven't yet, hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. Once you do, you'll get the latest episodes of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. And it's playoff time, baby. You don't want to miss out on any of these awesome episodes. Flip, 2 more matchups to talk about in the Western Conference. Let's get to the other top team in the Western Conference, the Calgary Flames, taking on the Dallas Stars, who squeaked out a point to jump over the Nashville Predators for the first wildcard spot. For me, this is very, very easy. I also have this game going a 5-game series. I'm giving one game to the Dallas Stars, because as we've seen in the past with the Calgary Flames, that there is, one game, there is room for one game that they can mess up in. And that happens. It tends to happen a lot with the Calgary Flames in the first round. So I'm just going to give the Dallas Stars at least one, but this is a 5-game series in my books. They don't even compare in any of the departments. We're talking the entire forward core. Calgary Flames are favored for that. The blue line has really been great for the Calgary Flames as well. And then Jakob Markstrom's just been that dude this year. So as well as Jake Ottinger, and I know Scott Wedgwood has been in net. He's been all right for the Stars. I don't think they have any chance against the Calgary Flames. You're only getting scoring out of the top line of Rupe Hintz, James Robertson, and Joe Pavelski. There's no other depth scoring. Calgary Flames have done a lot this offseason, or not this offseason, before the trade deadline, at the trade deadline, to get the guys they needed to set them above and beyond. That's exactly what they did. That's exactly how they're playing right now, and they're absolutely going to dominate the Dallas Stars.
I just think, and you and I broke it down the day since Tyler Toffoli went to Calgary. That just gives that team so many different looks, Steele, so many different lines they can roll out there. And I think at the end of the day, when you have a line that has been as good as Elias Lindholm, Matthew Tkachuk, and Johnny Gaudreau has been, you can make an argument that that's been the best line all season. You can make that argument. There's lots out there. Don't get me wrong. But if they're not in the conversation for the best line this season, you're slacking, because this Calgary team, if that line can get going, hey, they got all the pieces, baby, to make a run. And I know we've said that about a couple of other teams, but it maybe holds more true for this Flames team than ever, because clearly it's time to win now in Calgary. Yeah, and man, I know we say it a lot, but this Dallas Stars team does not have it for me in the bottom of their lineup. The depth isn't there. If Scott Wedgwood is the guy you have to lean on as well, oh my goodness, this series might be over in a hurry. I'm not going to go as far as to go 4. I'm with you. I'm with you on the Flames in 5. I think 1 game to the Stars at home is fair, but I just don't see it here, Steele. I see it here potentially even less than the Nashville Predators having a chance against Colorado, because hey, if they get to Darcy Kemper early, maybe they have some luck. Nashville, I don't see any luck happening here for the Dallas Stars. I think they're a very lucky team to even be in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Don't deserve it, in my opinion. And Jake Ottinger has not been good down the stretch. And like I said, if you're leaning on a perennial backup in Scott Wedgwood, who I know has been okay, that's not how you win a Stanley Cup. That's not even how you win one series, if you get me.
Yeah, and for me, it's just like the Dallas Stars are just in a very tough position overall. And I'm not talking based off of this matchup, just like the entire organization. You know, they find themselves just squeaking into the playoffs. They don't relatively have a good team. You're only getting scoring out of the top three guys pretty much. Yeah. Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn's contract are absolutely eating away at your guys' future right now, with them not even producing whatsoever.
Yeah,
John Klingberg wanted out of Dallas too. So like, who knows where he's going to end up next year?
Yeah.
You know, you have Braden Holtby, you have Anton Hudobin, you have Jake Ottinger, you go out and get Scott Wedge, you get 4 goalies, and none of them are really producing right now. So they're in a real tough position going into this matchup, but they're also in a tough position for their future. What is their team going to look like in the next couple of years? Because, you know, for me, like I was really high on Tyler Seguin before this season started. I really thought that he was going to be that dude again. And he just hasn't lived up to my expectations. I don't know about anyone else, but my expectations for Seguin were really high before the season started. I drafted him high in my fantasy league, and he just wasn't that good at all this year. He had a couple stretches where he was decent, but if you're getting paid, what's his contract, like $8.5, $9 million?
I think it's
putting up. He's
closer to 10 mil, I think.
Yeah, he's putting up like 45 points this season. It's not enough. It's not enough whatsoever. So they're in tough water right now. I'll say that.
I agree with you, and I really like how you highlighted the difficulty for this franchise moving forward, because aside from Robertson and Hintz, maybe Heiskanen you can throw in there, who's had another down season, but Heiskanen is still a stud. There's not much to like about this team at all. And hey, don't get me wrong. I'm not a Dallas Stars forecaster. I'm not deep into their farm system, because I can hear the people going, do you know who they drafted 2 years ago? It's like, no, I don't. Clearly, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this year and this first round, and they don't have enough, because unless there's like a turn back the clock moment for Seguin and Ben and they go on some kind of crazy playoff run, this series might be over in a hurry. But it is playoffs, baby, and anything can happen. But I'm locking in Steele's and I's prediction here. Flames in 5 from both of us. I think that one might be easy money. I'm going to sprinkle on the Flames first round winner, 100% Steele.
Yeah, it's the same with the Nashville Predators series against the Colorado Avalanche. 5-game series for both of them, in my opinion. I think they probably will squeak out one win at home. But after that, the series, again, it's just pretty much over after that. And we're going to get down to the last matchup in the Western Conference. But I got to let everyone know about Built Bars. At Built Bar, they are all about the taste. They make it taste delicious first, then figure out how to make it healthy second. I don't know how they pull it off, but they do it every single time. Maybe for the fact that they are covered in 100% real chocolate. And you know me now, I love myself some chocolate every single day. Before I work out, after I work out, these protein bars are amazing. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and 17 grams of protein. And if you haven't tried the Puffs yet, you are missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars ever. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're not just a protein bar, they're a treat, and they too are also covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite right now with incredible flavors of yummy churro, coconut marshmallow, and banana cream pie. So go to Built.com, scroll down to the macros chart, and you'll be absolutely blown away. High protein, low cal, high fiber, low carbs. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Thank you for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every day. Don't forget, we are free and available on all platforms, which also includes YouTube. So if you haven't yet, hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. Once you do, you'll get the latest episodes of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Flip, one last series to talk about in the Western Conference. And to me, this might be the one that brings the most debate. The Edmonton Oilers taking on the LA Kings. Again, this is a series that I have going to 7 games, and I've actually got the LA Kings taking it in 7. I don't know about you, but it might be, this is probably the one that's, the hot take, the hot debate where we can have a risk. There's a lot to digest about, both of these teams and the situations that are in. Not great goaltending on the Edmonton Oilers side, defense looking absolutely trash out there. But then, everyone's argument is going to be Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. They can carry this team to, past the first round. They absolutely can. But I think the Kings are, a little bit well planned out up front with their forward group. Without Drew Doughty, it's going to be difficult, obviously. And I think it's starting to favor the Edmonton Oilers on the blue line, which is kind of surprising because their blue line isn't good. But I think, again, the LA Kings just have a better duo in net, Jonathan Quick, Cal Peterson. So for me, I've got the LA Kings in 7. What do you think about that? Or who do you have?
Yeah, no, I'm going Kings as well. I'm going Kings in 7 as well, Steele. You and I are usually pretty close with our predictions. I like Kings in 7. I was going to say Kings in 6. I'm not buying Edmonton anymore. I said to sprinkle a 20 on them for the Stanley Cup because I did think they could make the playoffs. And at that time, that was worth it. I don't know. It doesn't smell right to me in Edmonton. Their confidence isn't really there in that group. Every time this season turns to playoff season, it's almost a little bit Toronto Maple Leaf-esque. They lose their mojo. You know what I'm saying? It's like for guys on that team, and much like Matthews and Marner and those kinds of guys, Draisaitl and McDavid need to be those flashy, confident juggernauts that they are. Go out there and play your game, man, because those two guys are good enough to win on their own almost. That back end for both of these teams leaves a lot to be desired. I could see this series being high scoring, Steele. I know John Quick is a great goalie, but this series, I think, has all the makings of 7 games as well. I'll say this about John Quick. How about 85 games of playoff experience? And how about a pretty solid record of a .925 save percentage, 2.23 goals against, and an 46 and 38 record? That's some pretty good numbers for a guy who also has 2 cups. I think 2 cups. Yeah, 2 cups. So I'm sorry, but Mike Smith, see ya. Mikko Koskinen, get a new job, because I think this is John Quick's series to steal. And also, he's the kind of guy that if he goes a little hot here and goes into one of those modes where he's just on his head, which we know he can do, his career is winding down, Steele. This might be his last kick at it. Yeah. That is a caveat you can't ignore when it comes to a goaltender. And I really do think if he gets hot, look out, because this series might end quicker than 7 games. You see what I did there with quicker? Bang. Give me the LA Kings in this one because it's going to be a juicy odd as well. Because Edmonton, home ice, better forward group, arguably better defensive group, which is saying a lot. I think this is a good odd for an upset, Steele, and I really like that you're on board as well.
Yeah, and Jonathan Quick to me was, I was actually really hard on this guy over the last couple of years. I thought that it was time for him to potentially hang up the skates. The injuries were becoming really costly. It seemed like every other game this guy was injured with, a groin or a hamstring injury. It's true. And for fantasy, it really hurt your team. So for me, the fact that he's able to get back to this position and be his – I didn't even know his playoff stats right there. So the fact that he's .925 save percentage in the playoffs, he's got a decent record, goals against average, pretty low too. Yeah, he can be that guy. And for me, it only comes down to one decision why I kind of took the LA Kings at 7, and it's Mikko Koskinen and Mike Smith. I've said this all year long. I have absolutely zero faith in those guys to win a series or steal a game. Yeah. I know they did, there was a couple games last year when they played the Jets where they could have won. I know they got swept where, Mike Smith played really good. Mm-hmm. I just have zero faith in this guy to actually get them even past the second round. I know that Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl can carry them, but Mike Smith and Mikko Koskinen can't. So that was kind of the only things that I took into consideration for why I think the LA Kings win 7.
Hey, man, at the end of the day, too, and I mentioned it earlier off the top of this episode, be careful if you're doing a playoff pool with drafting too many Edmonton Oilers because, hey, don't get me wrong. McDavid, Draisaitl, beasts should put up some numbers. But if they get bounced, you're in real rough shape if you load it up on Edmonton Oilers, because obviously a lot of those guys too are going to go at the front end of your draft. So be careful there. That's Big Flip's playoff fantasy tip of the episode. Avoid any Edmonton Oilers. Thank you very much, Steele. Take us away.
Well, you always got to give the fans a little tidbit, help them out with their fantasy leagues.
I try.
And let us know out there what you thought of our takes on these matchups, where we went right, where we went wrong. Let us know in the comments, message us on Twitter. We always appreciate fans and listeners reaching out to us and getting into some conversation. So don't be afraid to leave a comment or message us on Twitter. With that being said, we'll get over to the Eastern Conference for our next episode. But thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, making it your first listen every day. If you want more, make your second listen Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q with insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available on all platforms, just like this podcast right here. So like we say all the time, if you haven't subscribed or followed us yet, do so right now. Once you do, you'll get the latest episodes of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast as soon as they're available each and every day, Monday to Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. You don't want to miss out. Playoffs are starting tonight, baby. Flip and I are fired up. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there if you play some playoff bets, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.